Welcome to another installment of the Goddess Keys, where we unleash and unlock the keys, tools, and jewels that lie inherently within on our pathway to liberation, sovereignty, and embodiment. And today we're going to talk about something that I've been meaning to share with the collective for quite some time. But I'm just feeling a little bit more called to share now. And I think I've just had to go through some internal processes to fully get clarity on what my stance on this topic is. But I'm going to actually be splitting this conversation up into different segments. But today we're going to talk about timelines and the art of navigating timelines and transcending timelines. So I'm going to start this off with a quote from William Blake, which says, "To see the world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour." So time is an illusion, and I know we've all heard that before, and part of us believes that, and another part of us doesn't quite see how that's possible. Because so much of our daily reality and existence, or quote unquote reality, I should say, and existence is predicated upon time. So how could it be an illusion? And it's almost like too much sometimes for our rational minds to consider this idea of time being an illusion. So let's talk about what timelines are and like really get into the nitty-gritty of it, to see if we can unpack this and gain a little bit more acceptance around how time is an illusion, and if it is an illusion, how we can much better navigate it, especially if we're here to shift the consciousness of the planet at this time. Because time in itself can be used as a weapon against awakening star seeds. It's weaponized against any form of consciousness on the planet, but there's a specific way that timelines can be manipulated for anybody who considers himself, whatever you call yourself, star seed, light worker, dark worker, like God seed. I know there's like all these different seeds and stuff, crystal child, like wherever you can fit in. But you know, if you're placed here for a very specific reason, and you feel a little out of your comfort zone in your family, in your society, in your community, and you know you're here to help with the ascending consciousness of Gaia, then I'm talking to you. All right, so let's talk about timelines. What are they? Timelines are horizontal fields which control what we experience on the linear plane. So we got to get really, like, even taking out a sheet of paper and literally drawing a horizontal line, that is a time, like that's the time that we're typically on, is that horizontal line. Okay, so there is a little geometry involved. I wasn't really great at math growing up and stuff. So this isn't like something that, you don't have to be a math nerd to be able to get this. I definitely have never been, but I do have an affinity for geometry and sacred geometry. So if you even look up horizontal art, so that's one way I was able to really start contextualizing timelines. If you look up horizontal art, and I'll probably share a little bit more about this, but it tends to be a lot more boxed in and oppressive. Even if you think about like Excel spreadsheets, right? Like there's a lot of horizontal lines on Excel spreadsheets. Like that is ruled by kind of that Saturnian time. Okay. So as human consciousness, though, continues to ascend, we are going to be moving into something called spiral time as opposed to linear time, which is way more accurate in the way that the universe moves. The universe does not move in straight horizontal lines. The universe moves in spirals. Okay. Well, that kind of means a whole shifting of the reality that we know to be true if we're going to move into spiral time, because so much is about having like a beginning and a middle and an end, and spiral time does not do that. Spiral time is infinite. So the key to mastering spiral time is becoming adept at moving through a series of timelines and reclaiming your identity while changing and recoding false and fallen timelines from interfering with your continued spiritual evolution. I'm going to say that one more time. The key to mastering spiral time is becoming adept at moving through a series of timelines and reclaiming your identity while changing and recoding fast and fallen timelines from interfering with your continued spiritual evolution. And you might be like, how am I going to do that? Or can I do that? Or is that even allowed? Because that's another thing that we're taught about time, is that it's stagnant and it is the way that it is. And there's a beginning, and then there's a middle, and there's an end, right? It's like even when we were raised in our school systems, you're not supposed to skip ahead in a book. You're supposed to read chapter 1 and then chapter 2 and then chapter 3. And you were even kind of like considered a cheater, right? Like if you skipped ahead to the end. And I was the kid who never skipped ahead to the end. Okay. So, I did not break the rules when it came to that. I was very specific about following linear time in a lot of ways to keep up with the system of the false matrix. Okay. So, I totally get it if this is feeling like, oh, this might feel a little too non-linear for me. Well, that's one thing I'll say. The key to mastering time, timeline manipulation, I would say, or I don't know if I want to even say manipulation, because the controllers of the false matrix are the ones who manipulate time. But the way I would say it is, in order to navigate timeline manipulation and so you don't get caught up in it, it definitely requires a form of non-linear living and to become comfortable with it. Okay, you cannot follow the horizontal timeline and be on the ascension path, because the ascension path is spiral time. Okay, so if you're following that horizontal path, immediately you're on a fallen timeline. All right. So just keep that in mind whenever you're hearing other people around you telling you what you should do or what seems to be the most rational or reasonable thing to do. If it's following a linear horizontal timeline, it's a fallen one. All right. And so just because everyone else is doing it, just like a lot of people's moms have said, just because everyone else is doing it, you don't do it. Like if so-and-so jumped off a cliff, would you? It's kind of that sort of thing too. You don't want to follow the herd when it comes to this. All right. So this level of time mastery, though, is going to require having a command of linear time and spiral time. Okay. So I will say, in order to master spiral time, you need to fully understand or comprehend how linear time works. Okay. It's kind of like that whole scenario of you learn the rules so you can break them. How, you have some musicians, right, who never studied music at all and were able to just have complete mastery. They were just geniuses right out the gate and didn't need to read a lick of music and just knew how to play. So that could be you, right? You could just be somebody who's just so in tune with the universe that you don't even need to know about time. You're just always at the right place, at the right moment, at any moment of, history or past, present, and future. And if that's you, well, I'd love to learn more about you or learn more from you, whatever, or what you have to teach, because I would love to learn that. But I'm not talking about folks who are like time wizards. I'm talking about people who are awakening to their spiritual path. They know they have they have something that they want to fulfill. There's a lot of barriers in place because linear time tells you all the reasons why those things are not possible and why you shouldn't do those things. And they're seeking a way to navigate around that. I'm kind of talking to these folks right now. So with that being said, you do want to know linear time so you can break those rules. Okay. And so one way to learn about linear time is to know how to command the angles, okay, and subvert fallen angelic timekeepers, okay. Know how to command the angles, also known as the angels, okay. So this is where we might get a little bit controversial, because we do have these things called fallen angelic timekeepers. There are timekeepers who, there are beings and entities that keep the human consciousness, quote unquote, in line and following certain timelines. And when you start busting out of the false matrix and being like, I don't want to do that, I want to do this, there are these fallen angelic timekeepers or fallen angels or angels that are going to come in and basically be like, oh, no, you didn't. Like, you about to get your world rocked now because you fell out of line. This is that very Saturnian energy, okay? And this is why time is very much associated with Saturn or Kronos, okay? So you do need to learn how to command the angles, all right? And a really great, dude, what was the name of that? Oh, yes, there's a really great show that I'm going to recommend to just kind of learn more about this if that's of interest to you. Check out that show. And first of all, I don't watch television these days or movies these days. I really am trying to cleanse my consciousness of that. That's part of the journey I'm on at this moment. That being said, that wasn't always my story. And I've also been on the complete other side where I have watched tons of shows and tons of movies. And I've learned a lot and gathered a lot of mystical, magical, spiritual information through that too, So I'm not suggesting like, hey, watch TV. But if you're on that tip, a good show to watch to kind of learn about this concept of commanding the angles and the angels would be this show called Shadow Hunters. It came out a few years ago before COVID, and it's kind of like a teen show, but it's pretty interesting where this 18-year-old girl wakes up and realizes that she can see demons, she can see the underworld, and she finds out she's part angel and basically has all these adventures around hunting down demons and all that kind of stuff. And then it gets into a pretty interesting concept around just because you're an angel, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are quote unquote good. All right. And she starts learning how to draw runes, basically sacred geometry. She starts learning how to command the angles or the angels. And they come in and, they seem like they're these benevolent beings, but they really, because she was accessing her goddess power so much, they took her powers away, and basically, she had a big fall from grace. So you can learn more about that show. It has a lot of interesting keys and codes in there. So I recommend it if you're on the TV watching path at this moment. Okay. So, but I do believe in commanding the angles, even though we are, the goal is spiral time. The goal is aligning with what they call the krystic spiral. However, that takes a long time because you have to get out of so much BS that you consented to on a subconscious way through programming, all throughout your life and your past lives and your parallel lives. Like it's a lot of deprogramming. So I do believe in sometimes you have to timeline jump. I think it's a quick fix. I think it's a band-aid approach to navigating time. But sometimes you're going to be in such a difficult situation that you need to jump a timeline. Okay, and so we'll talk about that a little later before the end of this chat that I have with y'all. I'm going to give you some tips on how to jump a timeline, because if you're on this path, if you're getting out of the false matrix, if you're having to navigate from 3D to 4D to 5D, and then sometimes you end up in a fallen 5D timeline, and it gets all weird. Even you end up in a fallen 7D timeline. It's a lot. So sometimes you're just going to end up in these like black hole systems, and not the good black hole, not like the cosmic mother. It's more of like an artificial timeline that's like designed to give you pain and suffering. There are ways to navigate out of that, and that's through timeline jumping. But I'm hearing a lot of us talking about jumping timelines in the like starseed community, I'll call it. And I'm for that as a quick fix and as like you need to survive. But thriving, you're not going to thrive just jumping timelines all day, okay? Unless, you could also just be a time traveler and you're here to do that. But even then, you want to be on spiral time while you're doing that, okay? So we're going to talk a little bit more about what that's about. So to get to the krystic spiral, just to kind of summarize, to make sure y'all are still with me, because I know I'm talking about some stuff that's might be a little abstract. Just to make sure y'all are still with me, the goal is spiral time, okay? This is being in alignment with the universe. However, so much of the systems of the false matrix has been based upon linear time, specifically horizontal time, okay? And it's very flat, and there's not really a lot of options. And if you don't fit into the place that's been carved out for you, there's going to be trouble. And usually that comes into effect by these entities, which are called fallen angelic timekeepers, that are kind of placed within the false matrix. A lot of times this is that sixth dimensional energy. And sometimes they're referred to as time lords even. And whenever somebody's referred to as a lord, you want to be wary, if somebody's calling themselves Lord. And that goes into the spiritual community as well. If somebody's calling themselves Lord, be wary, use discernment. Because, even if you think about how that, if you're tapping into being a god or a goddess, like that's something we all can tap into. But a Lord, that requires a very extreme hierarchy, you got to lord over somebody. Okay. So, all that to say, let's talk about aligning with the krystic spiral. All right. So you need to do a massive overhaul of trauma timelines in order to align with the krystic spiral. So this does mean accessing your Akashic records, knowing what's in there, what timelines are playing out in your life currently from past lives. Learning about that. It does mean learning about galactic history. It does mean learning about human history, a more extended version of human history, past what we have been kind of taught as being what is real. Like, first there was the dinosaurs and then there was the ice age. No. I'm not talking about that history. There's a lot more to the story. You definitely want to make sure that you educate yourself on that, and just learning more about galactic history, learning about Atlantis, Lemuria, learning about the Hyperboreans, going even further back, learning about the Syrian influence, the Anunnaki or the Anunnaki as they're referred to, all this kind of stuff, all the interdimensional interferences that have been on this planet. And if you're not learning about creation stories from an interdimensional lens, then you're going to be at a disadvantage when it comes to this stuff, because these interdimensional beings have a very high understanding of how to manipulate time. And, they're able to tap into certain consciousnesses that have been kept away from humanity for quite a long time. So just like being able to learn more about the technologies that they brought with them, the way that they think, why they created time is going to support you with this journey. So it does require, this is some big history stuff, having a big old history lesson and seeing where you fit in. Because one thing I'll say about these artificial timelines is you're going to start seeing that, as we've learned in the history books, history repeats itself. That is true. And that's because the controllers of the false matrix have very little imagination, and they just kind of recycle and rehash timelines because they're doing this so that they can harvest energy off of us. And so that does mean creating trauma within timelines. And that's why we've seen holocausts happen again and again. We've seen slavery happen again and again. We've seen coups and takeovers and DNA manipulation happen again and again. And so you're going to start seeing these different events within history. And this is called timeline trigger events. And so if you're interested and you're like, hey, where do I learn this information from? I'm going to give you 2 resources to look into. So one, I think her name is Divine Born Angel, all one word. Type in Divine Born Angel into YouTube. And she has a really great playlist on just talking about, like, starting from the 7 root races. That's where it would be great to start, the 7 root races. And just kind of going from there. She has a really great playlist where she just unpacks and downloads it to you in YouTube audio form about all, a good solid presentation on multidimensional human history. So that's one resource. Another resource I would recommend is a website. I've mentioned it before. It's called Aligning with Earth. And there's like 2 very comprehensive workbooks where they really go into they don't talk a lot about time, but they talk a lot about the history as it relates to time. And it's channeled from earth, like beings, nature spirits, and the consciousness of Gaia. So it's kind of like they got Gaia has the receipts, and it's just a person who created this is a clear channel for the consciousness of Gaia. So you'll learn a lot about the history of this planet through those Aligning with Earth workbooks. They're all free. It's a lot of reading, but it's very enriching. So that's another resource. And then the third resource I'll give for if you're interested in really taking a deep dive and learning about this timeline stuff is Ascension Glossary. And I know I've mentioned that like a whole bunch of times. And Ascension Glossary, that's the quickest resource out of the 3 I just provided, because they'll give you just a whole bunch of timeline trigger events. I will say it's not as comprehensive as Aligning with Earth. Aligning with Earth goes really, really in. Divine Born Angel gives a lot of description to but I would say that there's a lot of good information on all 3 websites, okay? So there's some studying required with this so that you can start seeing the patterns that are playing out in your reality so that you'll know when you're on an artificial timeline, and then you'll be able to discern what the lesson is that you might need to overcome, okay? So when we clear and thus change the past timeline in the present moment, we change the current timeline we have been traveling on as well. This allows for the creation of a new timeline and future direction to travel from consciousness. So this is kind of where, this is where we get into creating our own reality. If we're operating off of a script and we don't know it's a script, there is no creating our own reality. We're just going to be doing the same thing over and over again each incarnation. But if we become active and we become awake and we stop reading off of the script and we start becoming the director and the producer, then things get shaken up a bit, okay? So clearing trauma timelines, though, I will say it does require you to go through a period of intensive dark arts training, basically intensive shadow work, and to move through all of the etheric, AI, and inorganic time fields laid out by these fallen angelic timekeepers. And they're located in both the 6th dimension and they're located in the 9th dimension as well. 9th dimension is going to be a lot more of the AI stuff. And it's a timekeeping system called Chronos. Okay. You can learn more about that on Ascension Glossary. When this is done, you are able to uproot inherent slavery programming and command the angles or angels which rule linear time. And, I'll just say from here, on this awakening path, something I have learned that I'll share for anyone out there who, might be receptive to hearing it, is that I count on my higher self. I know I have guides, intergalactic guides that are supporting with my ascension and all of that. But at the end of the day, I have many, many higher selves, and I connect with my higher selves. I don't need to connect with no archangels, okay? And just with all of what I've learned in the ways in which these beings have been manipulated, even if they started out as benevolent, they've been manipulated a lot. And if you are constantly seeing channelings from certain quote unquote ascended masters and archangels, definitely have an eyebrow raised at that, and just check in with your spiritual team before you just go on that bandwagon. And, if you're getting a lot of archangel ascended master channelings, please just know a lot of times these beings are utilized and hijacked and cloned to thwart awakening starseeds, okay? So now let's talk about the angles or angels. They are represented by the Time Lords. Okay, what are the Time Lords? The Time Lords are the controllers of the false matrix who manage cataclysms and trauma timelines as a form of energy harvesting for the Phantom Matrix. So wars and natural disasters are utilized as a form of energy harvesting or looshing to feed extra-dimensional entities who are the hidden entities or egregores behind the false matrix. They work hard to make sure that people don't access their organic timelines and do a lot of resetting of clocks, memory wiping, and meddling with consciousness, human consciousness through etheric implants and mind wiping in order to keep us on artificial timelines. So I have been talking a lot about etheric implants and it's very critical for us at this time to make sure we're clearing ourselves of etheric implants. There are a lot of them, I'm not gonna lie. But it's very important to invest this energy to getting that taken care of. And on my Patreon, I provide a lot of resources around that. We're going to be going deeper into that pretty soon. I just created a whole new set of clearing meditations because there are so many. But this, clearing yourself and being vigilant around etheric implants also supports you with being able to keep out of these artificial timelines, these fallen timelines, and being able to discern when you are in one. If you have the etheric implants and you don't do anything about it, I'm sorry, but good luck to you, because there's literal etheric implants that are designed to keep us in these reversal systems. So to get out of that and to step outside of time, we got to remove these etheric implants, okay? So now let's talk about time and the construct of it. Hold on, let me drink my tea. I'm getting a little scratchy in my throat. Okay, so time is a construct that was built by the false matrix and is made real by the belief given by the collective consciousness. Once again, egregores. And if egregores is a new term for you, definitely start checking that out. If you're really invested in leaving this false matrix, you're going to have to contend with egregores, the collective unconscious. Those are like the largest gatekeepers to keeping us within linear time. I have some content related to that as relates to egregores and Neptune. Neptune is going to be really big with navigating egregores, having a contextualization of Neptune and where you fit into the planet Neptune, and All that is going to be important for that journey. So, so definitely check out egregores. I'm not going to really go into it a lot here. They're just collective thought forms. So time in itself is an egregore, okay? And it's kept alive and it's made real because we believe in it and we invest our time, we invest our energy into it. Okay. So time is built upon what is called a sextant matrix, consisting of 60 seconds, 24 hours, 60 minutes, etc. So remember I mentioned earlier, Time Lords located in the 6th dimension. Now we have the sextant matrix, okay? This numerical system was passed down by the ancient Sumerians, also known as the Anunnaki or Anu, and is represented by 60, and thus 60 was the most important number in the Sumerian counting system. So the rulers of history were also the rulers of time. Timekeeping in the Middle Ages and earlier Dark Ages was, throughout Europe, the jealously guarded secret prerogative of the church, okay? And thus, the rigidity of the barriers that contain time are directly influenced by the principalities which govern time. So I'm going to read that again. The rigidity of the barriers that contain time are thus influenced by the principalities which govern time. Principalities, that's just another word for egregores, collective thought forms of the collective unconscious. And then we go back to those fallen angelic timekeepers, or quote unquote time lords. In all actuality, time is not quite real because it is relative. The narrow confines that the human collective hold time within can directly stunt our collective evolution. So according to Paul Davies, until we have a firm understanding of the flow of time or the incontrovertible evidence that it is indeed an illusion, then we will not know who we are or what we are playing in the cosmic drama. Okay, so this goes back to that idea of like, are you reading the script and you don't even know that it's a script? Or are you acting or are you directing and producing? Are you yelling cut? Are you switching up the scene? What role are you playing, right? So let's talk about vertical lines for a second. So one way to subvert timeline manipulation and get out of the stagnancy of the horizontal plane is to incorporate more vertical lines within your timeline navigation. So that is a lot of times it's coming through that is a way. If we think about the horizontal line and then the vertical line, what do we think about? The cross. A lot of times there's just more angles that are created when you add that vertical line. You're able to move up and down as opposed to just going right to left or left to right. It provides you with more options, okay? And so there are vertical lines that can support you with navigating time and just providing you more options out of than just the traditional horizontal script. But vertical lines are still kind of oppressive too, it doesn't offer you that many options. Okay, so if we're doing timeline jumping and if we're trying to get out of like the traditional linear time, a great like halfway point, I would say, in between the krystic spiral and horizontal would be diagonal lines, okay? Diagonal lines are very dynamic. They suggest action and movement. They create this sense of instability or tension in a composition that our eyes can't help but to notice. And they convey dynamic energy and movement in artwork. So one thing you can Google is just like Google artwork with the horizontal lines, Google artwork with the vertical, Google artwork with the vertical and the horizontal, and then Google artwork with the diagonal. You'll find that the diagonal line artwork came during times when there was like Renaissance happening. Like there was like a moving and shaking with the artists. They were questioning the spiritual nature of things more. They were tapping more into daring creativity. So the same can be said for integrating diagonal lines when you navigate time. So when you are thinking about timeline jumping, don't just think about jumping from horizontal to horizontal or horizontal to vertical. Like, consider what diagonal time is. And so you might be like, well, how do I do that? Well, if you have an issue where you feel as though you have no way out and there's no hope, you are focusing in on a horizontal timeline. You're on horizontal time, okay? You are the actor in the script and you don't even know you're acting, okay? Because there's always a way. There's always an option. There's always another reality, okay? So you might want to really study the diagonal, all right? And focus in on diagonal lines, look into diagonal art, and just switch up the angle of which you're viewing your issue, okay? To support you with seeing another way to view this reality, okay? So it says that, and so I'm reading a quote right now from the website called cultureandcommunication.org, and the article is called Along the Diagonal Line. Okay, so it says, diagonal lines run a combination of up and down, left and right, all at the same time. They can be used to convey movement and instability. The diagonal is a dynamic force that grants access to several important domains, namely relation, contradiction, and the irrational. So when you're jumping timelines or navigating time or choosing your own timeline, it's not supposed to make sense. It's not supposed to make sense to everybody else. You're on the diagonal, okay? You're doing things differently. You're flipping the script, okay? You're incorporating a little bit of the up and down and the left and right, okay? So it's not for rational thinkers. That's one thing I will say. You got to get out of rational thinking. Rational thinking, and I shared this too when I was talking a little bit more about etheric implants. A lot of our etheric implants that we're transitioning out of as a collective, a lot of them came around the time of what they call the age of rationality, the age of reason. Okay. This is when we started to get really caught up in being rational. Okay. And a lot of that was a very intense form of mind control programming. Okay. And that definitely benefited the groups that I've been talking about, within this download that I'm giving. Okay. So another quote I'm going to read, it says, the diagonal is the origin of change, growth, perhaps even human freedom. An atom is deviated, wrote Alain Badiou, and the world can come into being. A whole new spark of life ignites through the deviation of the diagonal line, okay? So if you're trying to figure out how to master navigating time, start with the angles. This is what I mean. Like, start looking at artwork, okay? You don't have to master this in 2 seconds or whatever. It takes time to learn this stuff. Start with geometry and just looking at angles and looking at art, okay? You don't have to even solve geometric equations and stuff, but just start looking at different artwork and how art is able to be expressed horizontally, vertically, and then with a diagonal. And then you're going to start being able to incorporate learning about commanding the angles. Okay. Some other quotes. So this is from retroavantgarde.com, The Meanings of Line Directions in Art. It says, the dominance of horizontal lines in a painting or a graphic design project symbolizes peace, stagnation, melancholy, even sadness. The results from subconscious association of horizontal position with sleeping, retirement, or death. If I had a mic, I would drop it right now, but I only have my phone. I'm not going to drop my phone. Boom. Okay. These are art critics talking about the lines. Okay. And, these fallen angelic timekeepers keeping us on this one boring ass script. This is what they're trying to inspire. Death, sleep. Okay. Just really inaction, depression, melancholy, stagnation. All right. So if you're feeling those things, you are on horizontal time. We got to get you out. Like, you don't got to get on spiral yet, but can we get to the diagonal? Let's work on diagonal and we'll get to spiral. Okay. It says the dominance of vertical lines symbolizes strength, vitality, growth, life energy, potency. So in general, it gives positive connotations. So vertical is right. So you want to go horizontal, then you want to move into some vertical action with time. That's when you're going to first start doing your initial timeline jumps. When you start getting a little fancier, you're going to start playing around with the diagonal. And then, once you start gaining a mastery, you'll be able to ride the spiral. Okay. And I'm not saying that you're always going to be at one over another. It's not going to be like, first you do this, then you do that. Like you might even be able to jump from horizontal to spiral and then go back to horizontal for some reason. Like, it depends on the choices that you make, because there is no time, right? So things can shift, but the vertical is coming in because, a lot of the source energy is coming down the vertical axis, whether it's up or whether it's down, whether it's coming from the earth, emitting from the earth, moving upwards, or whether it's descending from the heavens, quote unquote, moving downward. So there's that vertical that's happening where we can connect to spirit. So that is definitely something to tap into. It says, combination of horizontal and vertical lines designates order, harmony, peace, and balance. So that's like, having a mastery over the horizontal line and the vertical will support you with gaining more options. But if you're actually like here to shake some things up and to like do some genetic path cutting, break some intergenerational curses, horizontal and vertical, you can't just stay there. You're going to have to go further. I'm just letting you know. Like, navigating the horizontal, vertical, that might support you with like creating your best life chances within the matrix, the false matrix. You'll have to do a lot of timeline jumping still, but you'll be able to kind of navigate things within your best interest, unless your spirit team wants to give you a kick in the butt and activate you more. So, but what this talk is to get you to go beyond the horizontal and the vertical. I will say that. It says the most dynamic compositions are the ones based on diagonal lines and foreshortenings. The dominance of diagonals is associated with dynamics, expression, motion, and fight. Okay, and if you want, you can type in an avant-garde art piece called The Futurists. And it says it was directly connected to sudden technological developments, but also had on purpose visual enforcing of radical futuristic manifestos. So yeah, the avant-garde movement was when they started using a lot of diagonals. Okay, so now let's talk about spiral time. Let's take it a little further. So, but before I get into that, I promised that I would share a little bit on how to timeline jump. So if you're not quite able to get to spiral time yet, and it takes time, I'm not gonna lie, let's get you out of this horizontal timeline if you're in one right now, okay? So here are some steps around how to timeline jump. You might want to write it down. I don't know. You might remember it, or you might want to write it down. It's up to you. So essentially, you want to first get into the 0 point field. The first thing that happens when you're in a timeline that is undesirable is you're going to feel triggered and traumatized. And remember, that's because The controllers of the false matrix want you to be those things so they can harvest your energy. So always remember, when you start getting all traumatized and triggered and you're crying and you're miserable and why me, woe is me, that is food. That is food for these beings and entities. You want to give them food? Because that's what you're doing, okay? So once I started to fully connect with that, I was like, y'all ain't eating off of me. Like that, and that's the power of the 0 point field. You might be like, well, how do I get to 0 point? I'm gonna do more content on this, but essentially connecting with your breath, meditating, putting on some crystal frequencies, stretching, doing yoga, breath work, taking a walk, clearing your head, getting out of the stagnancy of that timeline. Whatever you have to do to get there, do that. And then you want to start dreaming of what the new timeline would be. You can do this through writing. You can do this through vision boarding, like gathering pictures on Pinterest or some other platform to start mapping out through visuals, or maybe you're drawing it out, or you're writing it out. Well, what's your desired timeline? What do you want to be doing? Where do you want to be? But I would say get some visuals in it. Another thing you can do is create a YouTube playlist of people who are doing the thing that you want to be doing. Just create a whole playlist, put together 15 YouTube videos, start watching them, do the thing that you want to be doing. Okay. Then, all of the shadow stuff is going to come up after that, right? Well, this is why I can't do that. This is why this is going to happen. I'm not this enough. I'm not that enough. I don't have this. I don't have that. All the things are going to come up to tell you why you're irrational or delusional for wanting to even to aspire to this timeline. And those are the etheric implants, probably. Those are probably the, some entity attachments. There's a whole bunch of stuff, okay? But you can still jump this timeline, even with all that. I want y'all to know that too, because you're that powerful. So what do you do then? Okay, write out all the things that say why you can't do the thing, why you can't have the thing, why you can't be the thing. Just write it out. Don't try to ignore it. Just write it out. Then change those I can'ts into affirmations. So work on that alchemy process. You want to burn the list of I can'ts, continuing with that alchemy process. And then you want to act as if. Do 2 to 3 things that you would do if you were in that timeline right now. So if it's travel, start looking up plane tickets. I don't care if you don't have not $1 in your bank account. I've been there. Okay. Everything I'm teaching you right now or sharing, I have done it and it has worked several times in my life when there seemed to be no way. Okay. And things just happened. Okay. And let me tell you, I've had a wild ride on this awakening path. I've literally had to jump timelines and I've seen my reality shift within a span of minutes. It's been wild, so this stuff does work. But you do have to be in a certain frequency. You have to shift your frequency. Okay. But you don't want to, and then, once you start acting as if, you'll start seeing, you want to look for demonstration that things are moving for you, moving in that direction. And it'll happen. If you stop dwelling, if you get out of the victim consciousness, and I know it's difficult, but remember that's just food for these entities, and these egregores. Don't feed them, feed yourself. Okay. Reclaim your power. All right. So, but we want to move past the timeline jumping thing. Okay. Cause I've been in that boat where I've just had to jump timelines, every couple days, every couple weeks, oh my gosh, and it's just, and I did it from oh my gosh, if I don't do this right now, then I don't know, I won't be able to do this. I won't have, it was from a very scared, fear-based scarcity consciousness. And sometimes my reality really did look like that. And it felt like that, but, that's what happens when you're timeline jumping. So it does work, but I'll say if you have to constantly timeline jump, you're it's like you're always when I think of timeline jumping, I think of playing double dutch, jumping with the two jump ropes. You don't want to play double dutch all the time, just living your life. You want it to be a little bit more of a flow. I feel like spiral time allows you to be in that flow state more, where you're able to like really just create from a space of abundance. And it's kind of more of like this frequency of, what do I want to do today? Who do I want to be today? Like, it's different. It's just a different sort of way to move through life. And I very much prefer spiral time over timeline jumping. Okay, when you're in the spiral, you don't have to jump. You're just following the spiral and you're cared for. Okay, so let's talk about what that means. Okay, as we become adept at timeline jumping, we begin to transcend linear time and seeing time as a line. We move into what is known as the krystic spiral or spiral time. So one way we evolve on the time spiral is by integrating polarity through the law of one. Okay, so in order to be in spiral time, there is like I mentioned earlier around this whole thing around dark arts training, like you do have to go through a period where like everything is taken from you, kind of sort of thing. Like to get to that 0 point field, sometimes you got to be at 0 point. That might mean your bank account's at 0 point. That might mean your house is at 0 point. Like you ain't got no house. Like it can get like that. And I know that's very scary, and I know we want to avoid that. And, maybe there are ways to avoid it. I don't know. I think we all have our own journey. Looking back, when I've been at those points, like I look at my life now, I would never trade that, because there were certain very important lessons that I needed to learn. And a lot of times it was like to get me out of really karmic entanglements. And, everything had to be taken away from me to see the karmic entanglement. Okay, so I wouldn't trade that for anything. And then then you start really tapping into your creator, like knowing you're a creator being. Like when you got to create from nothing and you build and you create your reality from zero, like then it starts clicking with you, like, oh, this stuff really works. Like this is real, when you're stuck in all of your creature comforts of the false matrix, your egos, you got your ego going and all that kind of stuff. And then you're attached, you find your value within these things that you have, these relationships that you have. And a lot of it is based upon illusion. And that might be difficult to hear, but that was a part of the dark arts training. So sometimes when you're collapsing timelines, you are balancing out extreme polarity. Okay, and that means going through this whole spiritual warfare thing. You're always in spiritual warfare. This person's attacking you, that person's attacking you. And I'm not saying that that's not true. I'm not saying that. I'm not going to gaslight anybody and say that that's not true. However, what frequency are you operating off of? That's a frequency option. A lot of times that's associated with horizontal timelines. But there are other options. So what option are you going to tap into? What option are you going to choose? Okay. But that does mean going through like an ego death. Okay. Getting yourself to 0 point, right? Being able to see extreme negative and extreme positive and hold that balance. Very difficult to do sometimes, but this is how we start embodying the law of one, which is what we're moving into. So maintaining 0 point is no match or artificial timelines are no match for the 0 point field. Okay. They can't exist within them because they operate off of very negative polarity. So when you're embodying 0 point and you're embodying one, those artificial timelines can't impact you. If you do happen to be by one, you can easily identify it and be like, oh, okay, that's a black hole timeline. I'd rather not. I'm going to go do this other thing. Or like, it might even get in your energy field, but you'd be like, I'm not going to go down that route. So here, I'm going to give this back, and so that's kind of how it does require a huge shift in frequency. And that, once again, I would say, removing the etheric implants, embracing mindfulness as a constant practice, clearing your subconscious as a constant practice, clearing the negative programming as a constant practice. It takes time. Okay. This isn't easy to do. It takes time, but over a period of events and moments in your life, you're going to notice that as you do this, overriding inorganic timelines is going to help you to transcend karmic loops and to actually like fully embody what your destiny is outside of the context of the false matrix, or what I like to call grind culture. Okay, so I'm going to once again go over how to timeline jump, because I'm reading from my notes. I wrote these a really long time ago, and now I'm feeling like it's the point to share with the community. So once again, how to timeline jump. Clear your mind, go to 0 point, focus on 5 things you are grateful for. I didn't say that before, so let me just say that again. So focus on 5 things you're grateful, 5 to 10 things you're grateful for. So like really focus on cultivating your heart space, getting that large heartedness energy in the mix. Set your declaration of intention. What do you intend? What timeline do you want to be in? Create like an artistic vision board or that YouTube playlist where you're putting yourself in the reality that you're seeking to co-create. Transmute your fear by facing your shadow. Face all the reasons why your ego and your shadow is telling you why you can't do the thing you want to do. Then go back to 0 point again. So, maybe do a breathing activity, do some yoga, do a little meditation, put on a crystal frequency, what have you. Then change your I can't into affirmations. Change all the I can'ts into, the affirmations of you being able to do those things. And then act as if. Do 1 or 2 activities that you would do in this dream timeline as if it were already your current reality. And then, keep the positivity going. So if you start getting the scary thoughts and all that, go back to 0 point, say those affirmations again, and detach. Also, you got to detach, and you're going to start seeing things shift. Okay. So this timeline jumping method operates out of the universal law of empowerment, which states we are powerful beings capable of creating our desired lives. We have the power to shape our realities and should never underestimate our abilities. Okay, so I'm going to leave this with the following note. So I want to share with y'all, how can you discern whether you're in an organic timeline or an artificial timeline? Okay, organic timeline would be more of that krystic spiral. Artificial timeline would be that horizontal fallen timekeeper BS. Okay. So organic timeline would be, or I would also say an organic timeline could be diagonal too. You can make it, you want to follow the spiral, but we'll put diagonal in there as well. Organic timelines are joyful. You have joy, you're happy, you're in your flow, you're excited about the things that you're doing, you're excited about your day. It's expansive. You feel like you're constantly growing. Your mind is growing. Your heart is growing. Your energetic field is growing. Like you're just feeling like you're constantly evolving. Transcendent. You're having these transcendent experiences. You're getting to know your higher self more and more each day. There's a tri-wave frequency to your life, so it's not just polarity or duality, like this or that, either or. You have multitude of options, actually. You're not stuck. Heart-led. You're leading with your heart. What are my desires? What do I desire to do? Not like, what do I have to do? What do I need to do? And like I said, timeline jumping or navigating time, you got to get out of that rational thinking, okay? But you're going more from your heart. There's also a synergy. You're not doing this all by yourself. You are connecting with the universe. The universe has your back. You're synergizing with the universe. You're co-creating with the universe. It's not all on you to figure it out, okay? And then 0 point. You're mostly operating from the 0 point field. Non-duality, like 0 point is universal love. It's oneness, it's acceptance. It's knowing that, you are a part of all that is. So you're held, Those are some examples of organic timelines. Now, how do you know if you're in an artificial timeline? Guilt, constriction, I have to, I gotta. If I don't do this, then they're gonna. If I don't do this, then he's gonna. You know how it goes. Trauma loops. And you'll even feel it like, dang, I feel like I'm in a trauma loop right now. Like I keep having this same experience through different people. Bi-wave. Bi-wave frequency is either or, this or that, black or white. That's it. Herd mentality. You're doing this because everybody's telling you to do it. You're going this way because everybody's telling you to go this way. Polarity, binary thinking, okay? Those are some of the signs of artificial timelines. And I get it. Look, we all got to navigate these things, okay? But so it's not about you never being in an artificial timeline, because they're everywhere. There's little black hole systems everywhere. And then it's like, if you go and you're traveling, or if you're working, or if you're meeting up with people, you're going to the grocery store, all that, you're going to have these little booby traps all around. But if you're able to start reading the energy, discerning, you'll be able to know when you're in an artificial timeline and jump out of that. And then, once you do enough timeline jumping and you've done your ego training and you're embracing the 0-point field more, you're going to notice that you don't have to play double dutch as much, and you're able to flow with the universe outside of time. Okay. And it becomes this dance. You're engaged in this beautiful dance. So that's where I'm going to stop for today. I'm going to talk more about, the next time we talk about time, it'll be more around parallel timelines, parallel lives, and healing. We'll talk more about what does it look like to heal timelines, what are the specifics. But I hope this helps somebody. I've been meaning to do this, and I knew I was going to go in. I knew this was going to be a long one, so I was kind of dragging my feet on it, but I have to go in on this. This is this is something I've been studying and living a lot, and has been a big part of my liberation journey and my sovereignty journey. And I want to share it more, and I'll be sharing more stuff around this, but this is just the 101 primer. Sending y'all so much love, joy, peace, gratitude, and abundance until we meet again.